Welcome back to Behind the Fruit. I'm Lucy Robinson. Great leaders don't have all the answers. They ask better questions. Today, Mark Brooks, agtech investor and former managing director of FMC Ventures, explains why curiosity and values matter more than hierarchy. Hi, Mark, and welcome to Behind the Fruit.
Hi, Lucy. Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. So to give you a bit of a sort of an overview of yourself, Mark. So I know you've got a very interesting career in both agriculture and technology, from academia to startups, also to leading venture teams inside global corporations. But really, for anyone who hasn't come across your work yet, could you start by giving us a quick overview of your journey so far?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity.
No
So
worries.
I've always been really attracted to difficult things, hard things, things that are kind of off the beaten path a little bit. And so I studied meteorology at university, which is really the study of the atmosphere and the physics and the chemistry of the air. Studied that, graduated, and I worked for 10 years after that as an academic climate scientist at one of the biggest US research universities in climate research. Did that for a decade. And then I left that because I realized I don't enjoy being an academic. So I started my own company. It was an ag tech company developing decision support tools for specialty crop growers and other folks in agriculture. Ran that company for a couple of years. And then I pivoted into corporate strategy, worked at an organization called AICPA and SEMA, which is the world's largest association for accounting professionals, which is where I was leading strategy, and started their corporate venture capital program because that profession is undergoing constant reinvention. And then found my way back to science and technology, which is really where I wanted to be. And so I ended up at Syngenta Ventures, the corporate venture capital arm of Syngenta, and then most recently was head and managing director of FMC Ventures, which is the corporate VC arm of FMC. Both of those two companies in the ag bio space. So it's been a fun journey so far.
Yeah, no, sounds great. And it's great to know, or at least to explain to others, how your journey's developed, where you've worked, obviously working in large corporates as well, and developed a lot of leadership expertise, which is going to be a big part of our conversation today.
Mhm.
So really leading into that then, so I'm really keen to talk more about the leadership piece.
Yes.
Um, because you've taken a very non-traditional route into leadership. As we said, starting with startups, leading into more global strategy roles. But when did you first realize that you actually enjoyed leading people, let's say, rather than just doing the technical work?
That's a fun question. Um, I think it probably goes back pretty early in my career when I was doing the academic work. Part of the work I was doing at university was to turn the research into products, to turn the research into something that was useful, basically commercializing research.
Mm.
And that's not something you do by yourself. That's something that I had to work very closely with other scientists, other disciplines, other people throughout the university environment, as well as external stakeholders and partners. And during that time, um, I was sort of there was no formal structure of leading people for many of those projects. It was largely influence. It was largely alignment with these other stakeholders to achieve the common goal. And during that work, I realized this is fun. I really enjoyed trying to get people to work with me and me trying to work with people and trying to develop common goals, common objectives, common milestones, and then work together to achieve that. And when you create something together with other people, to me, that's a connection that really lasts a lifetime. You never forget those people and you never
Mm.
forget the work and the emotions and the ups and the downs of it. And that was just joyful for me to do. Challenging, but also joyful. And so then when I got later in my career and moved into a people manager kind of role, beyond individual contributor roles, into the people manager roles, that's when I was, able to hire people and develop job descriptions and more formally, take on that type of managerial role. That's when I was able to put those lessons, that perspective from earlier in the career into a more formal kind of practice. And I think I've gotten better at that over the years. I'm still developing myself as a leader. Right? You never really stop developing, but I think it goes back pretty early in the career.
Interesting.
Right.
And you did I was going to ask actually because you mentioned initially that, at the time there was no formal structure to managing people, and then you
Mhm.
mentioned that you were able to get more structure to that. But just interested to know realistically how much structure can there ever be to really managing people? Is there a specific
Sure.
structure you have in place, or do you find that that just has to adapt maybe? I don't know.
That's a
Yeah.
good question. I think it's highly contextual.
Mm.
It totally depends on the tasks to be done, the jobs to be done, the personalities, the all sorts of other variables that are hard to appreciate unless you're in the moment. Um, I mean, I think there's if you had to boil it down to a structure, I would probably characterize it in the most simple terms as alignment of values. When there's an alignment of values between people or teams or stakeholders, that's when you've really lengthened the runway and widened the aperture of what you can actually achieve together. If you have a fundamental values misalignment, then it's kind of hard to get anywhere. It's a very narrow aperture, and the runway is short, and the road is thin, and it's hard to get things on track. So to me, it comes down to values alignment.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've actually just had another conversation with somebody, which is also on a podcast, and that was a very big part of the conversation was around values. So
Yeah,
setting values um, to create the alignment for growth, to make sure that you're hiring the right people. Yeah, I think essentially, like you say, a lot of it does come down to values. So I think with that in mind, I mean, is that something that you've like evolved into your style over time? And how has your management style evolved
yeah.
as you become more experienced?
So certainly, I lean into the values piece
Yeah.
significantly. Let's maybe define what we mean by values. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, there's values like trust and communication and et cetera. But to me, values are also like appreciating one another's strengths and understanding one another's weaknesses so that you can adapt and fill in those holes. And there's values around perspective and feedback and openness and the psychological safety of being able to communicate and be open and have uncomfortable conversations with people. So that's what we mean, I think, by the values definite for me at least. That's what I mean. The the other part of your question about what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry.
And so just how your management style
Yeah.
has evolved, yeah, over time. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that early in my career, I didn't have any training for management. I think that's probably common for a lot of
Very
people
common. Yeah.
early in their careers. I learned really by how I was managed. And I had some phenomenally good managers early in my career, and I had some phenomenally terrible managers early in my career. And as much pain as that caused me in the moment, looking back on it, I'm actually kind of grateful for those bad experiences because it
Mm.
taught me how not to treat people or how to treat people instead. So that's informed me significantly. And then when I did a graduate degree, I did an MBA. Of course, you learn a lot of theoretical, stuff doing that. That also helps inform it. But I think the best thing for me has been putting it to practice, reducing it to practice and
Uh,
actually being put into a role or roles over my career where I've had to adapt and learn and grow myself as a manager and leader. Um, the other one aspect that I've really come to appreciate in terms of management style is that I tend to lead and manage almost exactly the way that I would want to be managed and
mm,
led,
okay.
which is giving away power. To me, a good leader is not someone who hoards power or who hoards information. To me, a good leader is someone who gives that power away to other people around them and empowers his or her team to make their own decisions, to make their own um, analysis, and to do things that they think is right for the overall common goal. Being aligned on the goals, critical. Aligned on the values, critical. But how you get there, who am I to tell you how to get there? You're your own person. You have your own expertise. You have, in many cases, you have expertise that I don't have, and so I want to lean on that to help you be successful as an individual and help us be successful as a team. A couple more things I'll share with you on that
Mm.
point. I have always tried to hire people on my team or recruit people to my team who are very different from me. I don't want a team of people who look exactly like me or sound like me or think like me. What I really want is a team of people who have different backgrounds, different expertise, complementary, and are going to challenge me, who are going to make me think differently and make me uh, you just see the world in a different way, because that's when we end up making decisions that are better than any one of us individually or better than any of us as a group if we're just if we're not challenging each other. So to me, that's that diversity of thought,
Yes.
I think is really critical. And yeah, go ahead, sorry,
No,
Lucy.
I was going to say yes. I think that's something that I've been talking to people around recently is
Hmm.
hiring for skills that maybe you don't have or areas that you need to improve on. So almost in some aspects, hiring people in certain areas that are better than you that you can learn from, and also that being a challenge across some leaders in terms of being scared of that. Hiring people that are maybe better than them in some
Yeah.
areas. I mean, what do you think about that? Do you see that or?
I've seen that in some
Yeah.
leaders, absolutely, and to me, those are leaders that I never wanna work for
Right.
or work under,
Yeah.
because I'm not gonna grow. To me, and I've tried to do this in the development and hiring of teams that I've had the joy of developing and hiring. I wanna hire people who are smarter than me. I wanna hire people who I think are better than me. I wanna hire people who are going to elevate me, who help me become a better person and a better leader. And I would hope that the way that I approach leadership is that I'm gonna do the same for them.
Mm,
And that's just how I think about it. So I think leaders who don't do that, who are scared or feel threatened
yeah.
to hire people like that. To me, that's a significant sign of insecurity.
Yes.
I'm actually very secure and comfortable with myself, so I have no problem hiring people who are far superior to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
Yes.
kind of the joy of leadership.
That's it. And it's gonna be better for the team. Everybody's gonna grow together. You'll learn, they'll learn, in the surely that is going to be a good outcome again if done in the
Yeah.
right way. But I think
Mm.
talking about that in terms of hiring, so you built FMC Ventures, so the team there from the ground up,
I did.
but particularly when you were hiring for senior roles, were there certain traits or behaviors that would typically make someone stand out?
So definitely, and I'll answer this both for the senior role and the more junior roles too, because I think the answer is largely the same.
Okay.
Um, the traits from me that would really make someone stand out, and the people that I hired stood out with these traits, was excellent technical and scientific domain knowledge or ability to learn that type of stuff very quickly. So that was a huge trait that stands out. The next one for me was a really good command of financials, being able to find your way through a P&L balance sheet, cash flow statement, capitalization table, etc. That's it's a skill, I guess, more than a trait. But in terms of the traits, to me, it's about the person, the interaction of the person. I In the roles that I was hiring for and was leading at FMC Ventures, it was a very externally facing function. So we're constantly out into the world, interacting with venture funds, other corporates, startup companies, even internally within, within the company, the various business unit leaders and C-suite leaders. So a lot of this kind of interpersonal, you know, stuff was happening. And so the traits needed to be a strong disposition towards curiosity
Mhm.
and a love of learning. So to me, when I would approach these conversations internally and externally, and when my team would do this, I wanted people on the team who would approach every conversation with curiosity first,
Mhm.
wanting to understand and learn from the other person about their view of the world, their problem space, what's going on, the challenges, the opportunities, et cetera. See the world through their lens. It's not helpful if we would show up with our own opinions constantly. It was more helpful when we showed up with the desire to understand and learn. So that was that sort of that leading through curiosity. I think is one of the biggest traits that I found to be critical for success in the role, and one that I was definitely hiring for. And I think maybe one more I would offer would be incredibly strong communication ability. So I guess it sort of goes in line with the curiosity point, but it's the ability to take very complex information and sometimes disparate information and ambiguous, contradictory information at times, and
Mhm.
put it together in a way that was digestible and understandable, and you're able to kind of do something with it. That to me is
Mm.
also a trait that was always super critical.
And I'm just thinking about that. So curiosity, is that
Mm.
something that you would be able to pick up during an interview process? Do you have any particular sort of go-to
Yeah,
methods that would you use to assess their level of curiosity during the process?
I do. I did. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
still do.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, two things I'll answer with that. One is,
Yeah.
you can always tell
Mhm.
how curious someone is by the questions that they ask,
Yeah.
or the questions they don't ask. In a typical interview, the hiring manager asks a lot of questions to get to know the person, and then usually you save some time at the end for the candidate to ask questions of their own. The candidates who ask questions of their own that are deep, insightful,
Mhm.
that are somewhat provocative, but in a healthy, like non belligerent way, those people to me are much more interesting,
Mm.
because it signals to me that strong curiosity. Whereas people who ask basic questions like, how much travel is there, or what CRM do you use? Like those are legitimate questions. I'm not knocking them at all, but to me, that's just a
Yeah.
different level of curiosity than the higher level, the more strategic kind of forms of curiosity. So that's one. The
Mhm, mhm,
second thing I would always do, when I developed my team at FMC, is I invited, or I required
mhm,
candidates to do a very short case study. And it was short, a small ask of their time. And the case study was intentionally designed to be ambiguous.
mhm.
Maybe that's one more trait I should mention, is a comfort with ambiguity. So the
Okay, yeah.
case study was designed to be ambiguous, where I would ask the candidate to develop a very high level investment thesis on an area of their interest that's relevant for, for the company. And high level, don't put more than an hour into this. I don't care if it's in slides or a Word document, doesn't matter. Present it however you want to present it, and lay it out for me. And then we would talk about it
Mhm,
as part of the interview process. And to me, there was no right answer to that exercise. There's no wrong answer to
mhm,
that exercise. What I was looking for was the approach that they took. What questions did they ask themselves as they were going about the process of doing the case study? How did they present that information? What did they present? What are the gaps they identified? Why did they identify those? That
mhm,
sort of that to me, that type of approach was probably the most valuable, uh, data point that I was able to collect throughout the interview process. And
mhm.
some people who interview well, like on Zoom, um, I was really jazzed about, and I got the case study. I was like, this is not This is not what I was
Mm,
looking for. And some people who were kind of mediocre interviewers, I would get their case study and like, that's really good. I'm really impressed. And
mm,
so it changed my filter. It changed my lens a little bit on, kind of reallocating the pool of candidates that came into the team. And the folks that I ended up hiring and working with, I'm incredibly proud, to
mm.
have done the work with them. They turned out to be the perfect team.
Nice, nice. And I suppose it's that some people are not always great at interviews. Like interviewing itself can be a skill and people can be great at interviewing, but maybe not as good at the day-to-day job and then vice versa. So I imagine that
Yeah,
helps you, yeah, understand, like you say, their thought process, how they do things, and a little bit more insight as to what they would actually be like in the day-to-day.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
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 yeah. Did you
definitely.
ever do you ever do that where they had a really good case study, but it didn't work out, maybe? Or as in terms of they started and it wasn't a good fit, or do you think
Um,
it's like a fail-proof sort of?
no, I would. It's definitely not fail proof. Nothing is when you're
Yeah.
dealing with people.
Yeah.
People, but no, I don't think I ever had a situation where
Mhm.
everything looked good, and then the hire didn't work out.
Okay.
I don't. I
Interesting.
haven't. That's knock on wood. It hasn't happened
Yeah.
yet.
And on the flip side, when you're interviewing someone, are there any red flags that you specifically look for, which tells you they're not going to be right?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, maybe they're not red flags. Maybe they're just bright orange flags for
Okay.
me.
Cool.
I think it's the folks, and I experienced this when I was interviewing
Mhm.
people for the both the senior and the junior roles on the team. The orange flags for me would be the people who think they know everything there is to know already. So they
Mm,
come in with a lot of opinions on particular segments or topics within the industry. And maybe they're justified, but and often in many cases I would find that they were they were almost putting a stake in the ground with their opinion in order to have a stake in the ground. There
mm.
was no like substance behind it or like rationale behind it other than to just have a stake in the ground because that's what you're told to do is put a stake in the ground.
Right.
To me, that's like that can probably be coached out of people over time, but to me, that's sort of a profile that was completely unattractive to me, which I guess goes back to my point of curiosity, leading by curiosity. Kind of, that's the opposite, I guess.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yeah.
the other, the other one for me that I experienced and would shy away from in terms of orange flags would be the people who I didn't think would be coachable. And as a leader, going back to our comments earlier, giving away power, empowering others to be successful and do the work. To me, that also means I want to work with people who are coachable. So they'll listen to my advice, they'll seek out advice and feedback and perspective, and then adapt and pivot and adjust and ideally become a better person and a better teammate and a better professional, that they can succeed more in this role as well as take that with them to their next role. So I want people who are coachable and people who would interview with me who I didn't think were coachable. That was always a big red flag for me.
Okay, great. And then when it comes to actually looking at coaching or deliberately growing the leaders underneath you,
Mhm.
um, I mean, how do you do that? How do you deliberately grow them rather than, let's say, just hiring and then managing them?
Yeah. So I'm kind of drawing from my own experience
Yeah.
earlier in my career with good managers and bad managers. The best growth that I've ever had, me as a person, as a professional, has been those moments where I've been uncomfortable with what I'm
Mm,
doing. Uncomfortable in a good way, like
in a good
right on
way.
the edge of where I think I'm doing a good job, and right on the edge of where I'm capable, but I'm starting to tiptoe into a world where I don't quite have it to to do what needs to be done. And I like to put people in those situations because that's how they're going to grow. That's how they're going to develop. And so for me, development and growth within a team is ensuring that whether they're a senior person or a more junior person, that I'm giving them the power, giving away power, but I'm also giving them tasks or assignments or goals or responsibilities that take them right up to the edge of where I think they're capable and where they think they're capable so that they have to walk into ambiguity, discomfort. Of course, I'll be there as a safety net to
Mhm.
coach, guide, help, advise. I'm not going to give them the answers of any of this stuff, but I'll be there as a support system to help them through whatever it is that they're trying to figure out. So to me, that's the critical thing for a leader to do in terms of growth and development of other
So it's
people.
really pushing them to the next level, so and that's the only way
Absolutely.
that they're able to essentially reach the
Absolutely.
next level. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the reality is everybody eventually leaves a job.
Mhm.
Um, and you don't stay in the same team forever. You might move around internally, maybe you'll leave and go somewhere else. That's kind of the way the world works. So the way I look at it is I want to develop a team of people who can do amazing work, who
Mhm.
are better than me, who I can coach and advise and develop and build, knowing that eventually they're going to leave and go somewhere else. And I want to make them more than they are now so that when they leave to go to the next place, they are able to take that with them and they're able to make that next move because of what I helped them achieve and accomplish in their current role. Um, to me, that is one of the legacy traits of a good leader is to
I
do
think
that.
everybody gets those moments where they're, uncomfortable. And I know a lot of people call it, I think imposter syndrome comes up a lot. Some people don't like that term and they call it, I guess, I think they call it a growth moment or something like that. I've heard flying around it if you've heard
Yeah,
that. So yeah, it's not
yeah,
imposter syndrome. It's you're in a moment that you're learning and you're growing, which makes sense. I get that. So yeah, but I think it's those moments, as you say, that push you outside your comfort zone so you can get to the next level. But everybody gets it, no matter where you are in your journey.
yeah.
But I think if you're just sitting in where it's comfortable, then you're never going to improve. I don't think anyway.
You're
So
never going to grow. You're never
uh,
going to, if you're, I've always thought this throughout my entire career. If you're comfortable, you're not growing. If you're
no.
uncomfortable, then you at least have the potential to grow.
Exactly. So you've had your role and even whole teams you've built eliminated. How did that experience change your view of leadership? And really, what did you
Yeah.
learn about identity and resilience when the title disappears?
Yeah, that's happened. And FMC was the most recent example of that. Having built the function really from the ground up, developing a team, the processes, building a portfolio, the strategy, everything was kind of humming, and then poof, it's all gone. What I learned from that experience was that the title is not really what matters. I mean, yeah, I had the big fancy title at a Fortune 500 company, and so did my team. But to me, the title isn't what matters at the end of the day. What matters at the end of the day to me is how you treat people and what you do as a leader in order to build other people, develop other people. And in the case of the work I was doing, is creating value for the startup companies that we were working with, investing in, and engaging with. Because that is really what matters years from now. The title, nobody's going to even remember who I was at FMC. Nobody's going to even remember the title that I had. It doesn't matter. But what will matter is the impact that my team and I made on the industry and on the companies that we worked with. And to me, that's that's what matters more. That's what kind of creates the legacy. Also, what I came out of this realizing is that the relationships that you build and create throughout all of that work, some of those relationships disappear because they were transactional in nature, but a lot of these relationships will stick around because they were meaningful. created something with someone else. You built something with someone else. You connected on a level that was a lot more than just the transaction of delivering the task at hand. And those are the types of things that will carry to the next role and the next role and the next role and the next role. And so that's sort of creating this equity, this judgment equity, this relationship equity, this credibility equity, that I'm proud that I was able to generate for my team,
Mhm.
who have also, also kind of moved on and experienced the same thing. So that's one aspect. I think maybe the second aspect is resilience. Hmm. In today's world, um, the average CEO tenure at a large corporation is down to just a couple of years.
Yeah.
I think the average lifespan of a company now on the Fortune 500 list has shrunk,
Mhm.
from a long tenure 50 years ago, 30 years ago, down to a very short tenure today. And with that is going to come constant churn, constant change, constant reinvention.
Mhm.
And so that means that you as an individual, me as a professional, we all have to have wired within us a significant amount of resilience,
Yeah.
to be able to not take it personally, but to be able to take the best of what you learned and did and apply that to the next thing, and then rinse and repeat. And so I think that's kind of what I took away. I think maybe one last thing is in terms of leading people and managing people. Um, yeah, I mentioned earlier that I believe a good leader is someone who develops and grows people knowing that eventually they'll go somewhere else. And being part of that legacy is pretty cool.
Mhm.
So I'm proud of what I did with FMC Ventures and our team because I know that those people have gone to do other things. And I'm proud to have been a part of their growth story or their career trajectory and arc. Um, but it also changed kind of how I think about leading next, which is probably with more humility and more humbleness, maybe than I've had before, because I know that it can all end any second.
Because you know that if you're doing a good job, I guess, and helping people to learn and develop, that eventually they're probably gonna move on to the next stage in their career and they're gonna develop essentially. Is that how you see it?
Precisely, precisely. That's exactly right. Yeah,
So you mentioned about CEOs lasting, on average a couple of years, and I think
yeah.
that's across the board in terms of how long people are staying in their roles in general at the moment compared to 30, 40 years ago. Um, what are your thoughts around that in terms of, so we do get many clients that are nervous around hiring people that have only been, 2, 3 years and then they move on, which I totally understand their concerns, absolutely. But we are seeing this more and more. So, I mean, what are your thoughts around that? Do you have those concerns? Does it depend on the reasons? Like, yeah, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely more common than it used to be. People being in a role for a couple of years or a few years and moving on. I think that used to be looked at upon as job hopping and a
Hmm.
negative. Today, it's a lot more common, not because people are job hopping more, but I think it's a lot more common because these larger businesses are churning more. And a lot of these transitions are not under one's control. Some of these transitions that happen are because the company downsized or shrunk or restructured, and the people who are affected by that cannot be to blame for those short durations. So I think it's all contextual. I mean, I think if I'm looking at a candidate who has had a series of short tenures at various places, I'm probably going to ask about it. Yeah, I mean, allow like, why did you do this? Why is it because of growth? Were you seeking growth and development? Was it a bad fit? Was it what was going on there? Again, there's no wrong answer or right
Yeah.
answer to the question. It just adds color to that. And so I think I look at it as less of a negative today than perhaps ever has been before. Also to note is if you see these short tenures of people or short tenures of roles over time, I think it's important to put that in the context also beyond the downsides of corporations, but also look at, has the person had a trajectory within those short tenures that demonstrates increasing roles of responsibility, increasing aperture of accountability, increasing leadership mandate, management mandate, et cetera, because that signals to me a person who is growing and
Mhm.
who wants to continue to grow. And so that's, I think, an important kind of contextual data point to consider.
Yeah, and I think on the flip side of that, mm, again, a lot of companies might be nervous around somebody who's been in the same company for a very, very long time. I think if they have constantly evolved within the company, that's different if they've
Mhm.
constantly moved up the ladder. But I think if they've been stagnant, again, that can be I don't know, unwillingness to change maybe or adapt. Particularly at the moment, I think things are evolving so quickly with AI and tech and all the things that people
Yeah.
have to be able to adapt. So yeah, so it's a hard one, isn't it? Just to get it right. There's no
Yeah.
sort of right answer there. But
Yeah. Yeah.
shall I come back to the other
Yeah.
question?
I'm ready for the other question now. I remembered it. I'm ready.
Right.
Sorry about
Okay.
that.
So what's a leadership belief you hold that most people in your industry might disagree with?
Well, in my industry, I know that HR systems are constantly talking about talent retention, recruitment and retention. So getting the right people hired and into the company. And then once they're there, keeping them there by giving them stock options or vesting options or other things like that. And that's absolutely critical. I'm all on board with retention. But to me, where I disagree is that I think there's a metric that's more important than retention. I think the metric that's more important than retention is trajectory of that person. And what I mean is kind of going back to my earlier comments, people will always eventually move on to the next role. And I want to give people enough experience, enough growth, enough development so that they have options. If their option is to stay on my team, great. Let's keep working. Let's keep growing and doing things together. But if they also have options to grow into another role within the same company or a different company that's a bigger role than where they are now, I support that. I encourage that. I welcome that. I celebrate that because it means that I've done something as a leader that gave them the ability to go to that next role that is bigger and bigger than what they're doing now. And so I look at it as, yes, retention is critical, but I also think we should be looking at the more important metric, which is the trajectory of a person or their career arc.
Mm. I suppose looking at what's realistic within that and then planning for it as well, whether it's succession planning or just
Absolutely.
talent pipelining. Yeah, just so it doesn't just hit you and then all of a sudden you've lost somebody with no clue and no idea what to do
Well, that's
next.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think when with this mindset that I just described,
Mhm.
then to me, what this mindset achieves, that person gets optionality to grow and build their own career, and I would be part of that. Like there's a legacy, a thing to celebrate there. But also, it means that when that person is in this role with me, it means that they're going to give me and the team the best while they're here. They're not just going to show up and clock in and clock out. If they're growing and developing and they have optionality, it means that while they're here, they're going to deliver their best. And everybody wins when that happens.
Nice. And your work has taken you everywhere globally. So I know you've worked across places like Brazil, China, Europe, South Africa. What have you learned about leading teams across cultures? So leading across cultures, different working styles. I know it's quite a broad question, but yeah, what have you learned about that so far?
Yeah, every culture has nuances, right? I
Yeah.
mean, some cultures are direct and very forceful with their words.
Mhm.
Some cultures are very indirect, and you kind of have to guess or interpret in between the words.
Mhm.
I get all that. I think what I've learned across. I've done investments and been on the boards of startup companies across 5 different continents, and the US and Europe and Asia and Africa and South America. I love all of it. And I think what I've maybe learned the most in terms of these cross cultures is to be adaptable and to seek first to understand.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is kind of going back to earlier comments of starting with a curiosity, understanding and seeking to understand where my counterparts in these other cultures understand where their head is, how they see the world, and then wherever that is, beginning from that point to move forward.
Mhm.
And so I think to me, it's been a joy and a ton of fun, and
Mhm.
something that I would love to continue to do. I've been I think very fortunate to have the opportunities that I've had to work to do meaningful work on so many different countries and continents, and I've grown a lot from that as a professional, and I hope to continue to build on that and leverage that
Mm.
as well.
Nice, yeah. I mean, I agree. I love learning about, yeah, different cultures and working internationally. Have you read the book, The Culture Map? Have you come across that?
No, I have not.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna write
really
that down.
interesting. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the author, but yeah, really interesting book, and it describes different cultures around the world, and then has loads of like graphs and things to show like where who are the most direct in terms of speaking, and who, like
Yeah.
you say, talk between the lines, and you have to
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
read the
Yeah.
air, I guess. And
Yeah.
yeah, this is
It's
also
been
very
it's been interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
And, on the direct versus indirect kinda comment,
Mm.
it's been interesting. When I was first exposed to that earlier on in my career, it was kind of it sort of hit me. I was blindsided by it. I was like, "This is not expected." I didn't really understand it, but, having done it for multiple years now, I'm
Mm.
adaptable.
It
I can
definitely helps for to understand when you're, wondering why somebody's acting in a certain way, to understand that actually they're not weird, it's just a culture, or
That's
things like
exactly
this.
right, yeah.
But
Precisely,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, so
Precisely. Yeah.
great. So you're now exploring your next chapter. As you said, your priorities are it's about something global, impactful, something centered around really building something new. So yeah, how would you describe it in terms of what is next on the horizon for you?
Yeah, so I've got a belief, a very strong belief that entrepreneurs, people who found startup companies and innovators, those are the kind of people who will shape the world and who will shape the next global economy. And I want to work closely with entrepreneurs and startup companies and work closely with incumbent corporations. So I really want to be in a role next where I'm bridging those two worlds together. So the ideal situation, I think, would be going to a mid to large cap corporate, more than 1 billion in revenue or so, and take on a role where I am building, developing, overseeing a corporate venturing function, an M&A function, internal innovation and incubation types of work, and really being that bridge between the
Mm,
fast moving, messy, chaotic startup world and the more systemized kind of corporate world. That's something that I've done a lot of in my last couple of roles, and I think I'm pretty good at it, and I really enjoy it. And that's where I think corporates need startups, startups need corporates, because that's how you reshape industries, and that's something that I would love to continue to do next.
Definitely excited to see where you go next.
Me too. Thank you.
So if you look ahead to the next 5 to 10 years, I mean, maybe we even look sooner than that. But what do you think the most effective leaders in agriculture and sustainability will need to do differently? So, what skills or mindsets are going to matter the most?
Good question. I think there's this couple. I'll give you both answers: skills first, and then a mindset second.
Okay.
Skills, definite scientific understanding and appreciation, and an ability to rapidly absorb all the technical topics and scientific topics that are related to ag bio. That is the future of the industry is biotech. So understanding that world, I think, is critical from a skill set perspective. I think leaders also in this space need to be thinking a lot more holistically in the future about innovation and what that means, both for the corporate side as well as for the startup side, and linking those two worlds together. I think that's one, and I think another one would be patience.
Hmm.
Agriculture and food, it's a relatively slow moving industry compared to other
Yep.
industries that move a lot quicker. And so that means that the pace of innovation, the pace of progress, the pace of capital being allocated and capital getting its returns back,
Mhm.
the patience there is just a different profile than what you would find in many other spaces and disciplines and industries. So that's something that I think leaders in the next decade or two in this industry need to be comfortable with and leaning into more. And then I think also finally, I would also argue that we need leaders in this industry who come from other industries. I have
Cool.
always found that in my own personal experience, as a both a board member on startup companies as well as a individual contributor earlier in my career, the best leaders to me have been ones who give away power, who empower others, but they also are the ones who come from a discipline or a sector or an industry that's maybe different than what they're going into, because they can bring with them that perspective, that knowledge, a different point of view, a different reference point, which in many cases can be highly transferable to
Mhm.
ag and food or ag biotech. And so in my experience, those have been that's a profile, I guess, or a trait
Yeah.
that is, I think, is welcomed in this industry and needed to make the industry continue to evolve.
Great. Okay. And if you were mentoring the next generation of leaders, what's the one piece of advice that you'd want them to remember?
It's so hard. One, I have to pick one.
I mean, you can do more than one if you want.
Um,
You don't have to stick to one, but yeah.
One
Yeah.
piece of advice that I would give to the next generation of leaders would be to, I think there's two pieces of advice. One would be seek first to understand.
Okay.
And the second piece of advice would be curious. Be curious. Because when you do both of those two things at the same time, then you yourself will grow as a leader, but you'll also find the growth opportunities in the people that you're leading.
Hmm.
And you'll also find the growth opportunities for the work that needs to be done in your company. You'll find those white spaces, both in the people and in the industry. So seek first to understand and be exceptionally curious.
Great. That's very, very good advice. I'm sure that will come in useful to anyone listening. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. That's it for today's episode of Behind the Fruit. Mark, where is the best place for people to connect with you if they want to reach out? Would it be on LinkedIn or anywhere else?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Mark S. Brooks. You can also find me at www.marksbrooks.com.
Perfect. Great. Well, Mark, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. And yeah,
Thank you,
thank you for
Rachel.
letting us hear your story.
Well, thank you for talking with me. I enjoyed the time very much.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Fruit, a podcast by LCR International. We are global experts in fresh produce executive search. Hit subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and for more industry insights, connect with us on LinkedIn.